Today's lesson: modern CSS selection with is and has. In this lesson, we'll explore the powerful CSS pseudo-classes and has that transform how we select and style elements. Using is to simplify and combine multiple selectors. Leveraging has for parent selection based on children. Combining is and has for complex, conditional styling. Creating interactive effects with fewer lines of code. Let's discover how these modern CSS selectors can reduce specificity issues and simplify your style sheets. We start with a simple HTML structure containing a container with a heading and a card group. The card group contains 4 different cards: a basic card, a card with an image, a card with a button, and a highlighted card with a button. This setup will allow us to demonstrate the power of CSS is and has selectors with real-world examples. Now we begin styling with basic CSS. We set up the body with a light background and use a modern sans serif font. We're setting our typeface to Inter with a fallback to any sans serif font, while creating a light gray background. We remove default margins and add some padding around the page. The container class creates a centered wrapper for our content. We limit the maximum width to 800 pixels to prevent the content from stretching too wide on large screens, while centering it horizontally with 0 vertical margin and auto horizontal margins. This is a common pattern for creating responsive layouts that look good on various screen sizes. Here we style the main heading with a dark slate color that's easier on the eyes than pure black. We center the text horizontally and add some space between the heading and the cards that follow, with a 20-pixel bottom margin. For the card group, we use CSS Grid to create a responsive layout. We activate Grid Layout while creating 2 equal width columns. The gap adds 16 pixels of spacing between cards both horizontally and vertically. This creates a clean, organized arrangement that works well across different screen sizes. We're styling the basic card with a white background, rounded corners, padding, and a subtle shadow for depth. The white background creates contrast against our light gray page background. We round the corners by 8 pixels for a modern look. We add 16 pixels of padding inside each card, and the box shadow creates a subtle elevation effect to make cards appear slightly raised from the background. For card headings, we use a dark blue-black color to make them stand out. We remove the default top margin to keep our spacing consistent, and set the font size to 1.25 rem, equivalent to about 20 pixels. This makes headings appropriately sized without being too large. This creates a clear visual hierarchy within each card. Card paragraphs use a medium gray that's lighter than the headings but still readable. We increase the space between lines for better readability by setting the line height to 1.5. Here we style images to be responsive by ensuring they don't overflow their containers on small screens. We add slightly rounded corners to images while making them display as blocks to remove any default inline spacing. We add space after the image so text doesn't appear too close to it. These are our base button styles that apply to all buttons. We create comfortable spacing inside buttons with padding. We remove the default border while rounding the corners. We change the cursor to a hand icon on hover to indicate interactivity and make the text slightly bold for better visibility. The primary button variant uses a bright blue background with white text for high contrast. This styling clearly indicates primary actions that we want users to take, like submitting forms or confirming choices. For secondary buttons, we use an amber or orange background with white text. This creates a visually distinct alternative that stands out but doesn't compete with primary buttons. Now we introduce the is pseudo-class. The is function takes a list of selectors and matches any element that matches at least one of the selectors in that list. Here, we're selecting any image that's inside either a card or a highlight element, adding a subtle border. This is more concise than writing separate selectors for card images and highlight images, and helps maintain consistent styling across similar elements. Here comes the powerful has selector. The has function is like a parent selector. It selects elements that contain at least one element matching the selector inside. In this case, we're selecting any card that contains an image, giving it special padding and a colored background. Notice how we're styling the parent based on its children. This was impossible before the has selector. Now we're combining is and has for even more power. This selector targets any card that has either a primary or secondary button inside it, adding a blue left border. The is function simplifies what would otherwise be two separate has selectors. This combination creates more maintainable and readable code. This is another example of has in action. We're specifically styling the heading inside cards that contain a secondary button, making the heading match the orange color of the button. This demonstrates how we can create contextual styling based on the presence of specific children, creating visual connections between related elements. Now we're going up a level. We're styling the entire card group based on whether it contains a highlighted card. This adds a light blue background and padding to the group itself when it contains at least one card with the highlight class. This kind of parent styling was only possible with JavaScript before the has selector. Here we're combining has with interactive elements like hover. This selector targets cards that contain buttons and applies a subtle lift animation when hovering over them. We move the card upward slightly, while making this movement smooth with a transition. The has selector ensures this hover effect only applies to cards with buttons, not all cards. Finally, we see a complex selector that combines is, has, and state classes. This targets buttons inside cards that are either being hovered over or contain a focused element. The is function keeps our code concise by combining these states, while has ensures we're only applying the style to cards with buttons. This creates a subtle shadow effect on buttons when interacting with their parent card, enhancing the user experience without writing complicated JavaScript.